All right, everyone, time to take a look at the second episode of the day, which is Shifting Allegiances. The episode opens with some intoxicated individuals talking in Russian, chuckling, following a night out. At the point when one of them offers to draw his date home by giving him medications, he's shot with an arrow. As Greeno gets to move on, the rest of the team escapes. He carries the vendor to the Bratva, offering the man's domain in return for some help. Somewhere else, Curtis and Renee hit to Renee's condo, where his daughter and Dinah are holding up with an unexpected gathering. He's anxious to bring down Diaz, yet they disclose to him that since Diaz has so much force, it will be difficult to do. At Argus, Diggle briefs the group on Diaz's exercises, including his legislative and law implementation associations. He needs to use Argus assets to screen Diaz and his kin non-stop. His boss comes to keep an eye on how he's adjusting, saying that the job suits Diggle, and that he has revealed to Lila beneficial things about him as well. He offers to lead on Diaz. A firearm lobbyist runs weapons for the Quadrant. Argus has a group holding on to take her out, yet Diggle says not to, on the grounds that she may rather lead them directly to Diaz. At his sanctuary, Diaz is trusting that his suit will become fitted when Black Siren so will be custom fitted when Black Siren appears. He goes to kiss her, however she is disinterested. She additionally broke a deal with him the previous evening to go about as a dismissal at the docks. He suggests her that he needs her to carry him up close and personal Lance, so they can set out a portion of the standard procedures, and that he still doesn't believe her to do it with anyone's help and needs her to set it up. She vows to get it going. In a very much off-ended structure, Anatoly is viewing a ball game with his men when he sees something move over his floor. He gets over it, and the entirety of his men have been taken up by sedative darts. Oliver is to converse with him. The Bratva man Oliver had seen had given Oliver a blade, which he presents to Anatoly, revealing to him that he has been restored to the Bratva and that he will now be able to get back. He approaches Anatoly for help halting Diaz, and Anatoly stuns him with a taser. At the point when Oliver awakens, he is affixed to a seat, while Anatoly beverages and talks to him. He says that he no longer needs back in with the Bratva, that he gave him his entire life and that they underestimated him. Oliver cautions him that Diaz will do more regrettable, yet Antonio figures Diaz will make him rich. He discloses to Oliver that he can't in any way, shape, or form bring Diaz down all alone. Oliver reveals to him that the group parts his center, diverting him, yet Antonio thinks this is a silly transition. Back at the new Team Arrow shelter, Renee plans to get ready as well, but the group enlightens him concerning the disintegration of Team Arrow. Renee professes not to mind, saying that bringing down Diaz was continually going to come down to them. The risk that Diaz must be searching for another vertical provider now that Oliver and Diggle have brought down his activity. At the Chinese cafe, Lance appears to be glad to have a piece with Laurel, and she reveals to him she's heartbroken. Diaz comes in and plunks down. He presents Lance with an official request he needs him to sign. Lance discloses to him he won't. However, Diaz begins kissing Siren, utilizing her to get to him. The pair leave together, Siren clearly remorseful about the entire thing. At a betting nook in the glades, NTA sets up a laser receiver. They hear insights regarding an arrangement going down. They don't get the entire story. A man remains before the laser. Renee draws the man away for quite some time for Curtis to hear the area near the drop. Renee draws the man away for quite some time for Curtis to hear the area of the drop, and they leave. NTA gets ready that night to stop the arrangement, which they accept to be for drugs. They take on a couple of apostate individuals and open the cars to recover a colossal number of weapons. Outside there was gunfire. Two fighting teams shooting weapons at each other jump in, with the arms vendors seen at Argus before administering the entire thing. NTA runs into security and trans it out, and Renee freezes, having PTSD response when he recollects the last time he got shot. The group is noticed, however protected, when Diggle Argus group appear. Back at the NTA fortification, Diggle briefs NTA on the quadrant. They make sense of that They make sense of that the Scorpions and the Quadrant are evidently in conflict, and they got trapped in the middle. Dougal punches friend Tinty for the manner in which things played out, and they directly get back to work. Green Arrow shows up, educating the group about Diaz's interest in a city building he needed to give to him. He tells the group that Diaz is wearing Quadrant Ring, and Dougal asks him where the structure is. At Anatoly's, Oliver by cautions him about the dangers of working with Diaz. Anatoly isn't stressed. He doesn't get Diaz, and he comprehends Diaz's code. Oliver, however, says Diaz doesn't have a code or any respect, and that by working with him, Anatoly is selling out all that he puts stock in. At the structure of NT and Diggle thinks Diaz needs to store his approaching weapon shipment. Renee trusts in John that he can't quit pondering death. Harold says it was PTSD, and goes to Diggle that it's less about dying, but rather more about his dread that he could disregard his daughter. Diggle reveals to Renee that he needs to compartmentalize his life altogether for everything to work, and that he realizes it's difficult to do in the wake of being out of the game for some time. A truck shows up and backs up to a stacking dock. A couple men fire, stacking up with boxes. It turns out the Quadrant isn't carrying firearms into the city, but transporting them out. At the City Hall leader's office, Black Siren stays with Lance. The two banter. She reveals to him that he needs to work with Diaz. At long last, Lance understands that she has been utilizing his sadness over the genuine Laurel against him, and that aggravates her about Diaz. She's close to him that she's close to him. She is terrified of Diaz, and she ought to be too, and urges him to sign the request, or Diaz is going to slaughter him. Advises her there is not, at this point, any requirement for her to live in his home, and shows her out of his office. Jacob believes that even with Argus backing them up, it's highly unlikely to stop a shipment that enormous risk even the city. Rather, the arrangement is to crush it. In the shelter, Renee has another episode and John sees him. He inquires as to whether Renee is right, and Renee lets him know, no. He says he can go out there like this, and Dougal comprehends exclusive to him it's all right, even while the reign of NTA appears to be stunned by it, and Renee feels embarrassed. Lance returns home to discover Black Siren pressing her things. He asks for a valid reason she's so terrified, and it's just that Diaz is a beast. He feels her comprehends what she's doing, that he worked for Damien Dark so as to guard Laurel, and afterward how Dark killed her when Lance double-crossed him. Lance signs the paper, however says that she could possibly keep it on the off chance that she consents to let him assist her with scheming from Diaz. She leaves unthinkable yet concedes standard. At a quadrant site, Anatoly's men bring Oliver, still in chains, to where Diaz is hanging out. Tia and Arcus are watching the distribution center from above, and Dougal hands out spheres that will make the weapons obvious objectives for drone weapons. Chris occupies the creative detail with T-spheres while he goes around putting the plates secretly on trucks. There's a large portion of them done. The remainder of the group begins to join, and Argus sends in the first of the automatons, which farm a large portion of the trucks. The arm seller makes her getaway as Chris neglects to get a plate onto the last truck. However, by yielding a T-sphere, he figures out how to do as such, and the truck is wrecked. Diaz goes to the room where Oliver is being continued, hearing about the mission that NT and Argus just embraced. He punches Oliver when he denies being included, and keeps on punching after Oliver continues deriding him. Anatoly protests, disclosing Diaz that he battles without respect, and Diaz appears to acknowledge it, even while making threatening countenances at Anatoly. Diaz provokes Oliver to a battle, where the Washoe consents to leave the city, saying, "That's fair, isn't it?" The two battle. Diaz gets the high ground, and Oliver figures out how to switch it and winds up on top. When he is firmly in charge, Diaz takes a concealed knife and stabs him in the side. Diaz taunts Oliver. Sometimes life isn't fair. Oliver tells Diaz, "You have failed this city, and I'm going to take it back." Diaz leaves, deserting Anatoly with Oliver. Anatoly meets Oliver in a solid cell, bringing him gauzes and salve. Anatoly offers Oliver that he needed to see with his own eyes which one of them had respect, and thinks Oliver arranged the entire thing. Oliver discloses to him that he could Oliver discloses to him that he just had discloses to him that he just idea he could depend on Anatoly to be the man he knew. Anatoly instructs him to hustle just a bit with the wraps. Then he plans to get Oliver out. Problem, however, when Diaz's men appears to call Oliver. Back at the NTA dugout, Diggle, Kurtz, and Dinah are praising their win. They welcome him to join the group, and Diggle says he intends to oversee it with Argus. That doesn't mean they can't help one another, however. Back at Renee's place, Kurtz comes to see him. Renee's sure the group actually needs him, and he keeps freezing up at whatever point he ponders going out there. Zoe comes in and reveals to him that she realizes that he's Wild Dog. She explains to him that she needs him to battle for their home, and that it was Starling when he was harmed, yet that he instructed her to be courageous and to confront Dread. He embraces her and discloses to her that he will. At Diaz's place, Black Siren comes in to see him, bringing the official request he had requested. It says he doesn't think about the request itself, however, that is trying to get Quentin's dedication. A man with a weapon against Oliver. Diaz goes to Oliver that he doesn't need Oliver to leave the city any longer, however, that he will rather utilize his political associations to rig Oliver's preliminary. He gets a group of cops to capture Oliver, and Oliver's bail is disavowed. Uh-oh. So, let's take a look at some trivia surrounding this episode. Kurslik is working. Kurslik is working as a cohesive team to Captain Planet or Power Rangers. This is Renee's first appearance since Collision Course. This first episode that Felicity appears without having any lines. At the beginning of the episode, Anatoly is watching a Starling City Rockets game. Diaz chose May 3rd as the court date for Oliver, which is the air date for the next episode, docket number 11/19/41/73. The fight between Oliver and Diaz may be a reference to Batman and Bane's first fight in The Dark Knight Rises. Diaz says to Oliver, "You think you're so tough because it's been 5 years in hell? I was born in it." This quote on Mr. Bane's quote, "Oh, you think darkness is your ally? But you merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by it." There's also like in music and the fact that the fight ends with Diaz beating Oliver, although by cheating at least in Anatoly's eyes. When Quentin discusses Damien Dark, Buck Siren confirms that there is a counterpart of his living on Earth too. The location that Laura and Diaz meet Quentin is at location Laura and Diaz meet Quentin is at the set of Jitters redressed. So I think this is a pretty interesting episode, and yeah, things are looking good for Oliver. We'll get near the season, so yeah. So overall, I give Shifting Allegiances 4 arrowheads out of 5. Going to the best way to the final episode of the day, docket number 11/19/41/73. So until then, in the words of Oliver Queen, you have failed this city.